Hello, everyone. I'm Terry Sullivan. This is Dave Drason. We are back with another edition of Big Time Memories. And we should mention that a lot of the photos that we show on this program are from your exclusive collection from the time you were the official photographer for Big Time Wrestling.
Yeah, a lot of them when I was working for Big Time Wrestling, a lot of them pre-Big Time Wrestling, you know, when I was just a fan sitting in, you know, the front row of Kobo. And there's going to be a photograph today that was neither. It was at a birthday party in 1961 that I attended with Leaping Larry Shane for the person that we're going to be doing and featuring today on Big Time Memories.
And today, we do feature one of the all-time greats, one of the most popular wrestlers ever to step between the ropes and the squared circle. His name, you know him as the Mighty Igor.
Yes, the Mighty Igor, great wrestling talent, fan favorite, wherever he appeared, especially here in, you know, Detroit area, you know, for Big Time Wrestling. And his real name was Richard Garza. A lot of people, you know, called him Dick Garza. And he was born July 16th, 1931. He was born in Detroit, but raised, you know, just outside of Detroit in Dearborn. That's where he made his home almost throughout his whole life. And as a young man, he had a penchant for bodybuilding, you know, lifting weights and, you know, just, you know, as a young man, he had one heck of a physique.
Oh, yeah, even
you know,
his later
pictures
years
are going to show what I have.
Yeah.
And he ended up winning the Mr. Michigan bodybuilding contest in 1954. And shortly after that, he entered the Mr. Universe contest and the Mr. America bodybuilding contest. But I think it was the Mr. America contest that he got DQ'd. You know, how do you get DQ'd in a bodybuilding contest?
Attack one of the judges with a steel chair, or?
No, he got DQ'd by the judges because they said his arms were too big.
Wait a minute. You're in a bodybuilding contest and your arms are too big?
Yeah.
I guess they thought they were disproportionate to the rest of his body.
Right.
And I guess in bodybuilding, of which I know nothing, they measure that type of thing.
Yeah, and this is, you know, pre-steroids and, you know, those kind of, you know, drugs that, you know, guys took for years, you know, Dynabol and, you know, whatever. You know, this, you know, Igor was, you know, he was all natural, you know, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
You know, but there was a time he was working out at George Jacobs' gym.
And this is before wrestling?
Yes.
Yeah.
He was working out, still, you know, maintaining his body and physique. And there happened to be a wrestler, you know, who was also in the gym at the same time who was working out. And that would have been Brute Bernard.
Oh.
And Brute Bernard, you know, he was a little hothead, you know, in and out of the ring. And for some reason, I don't know what started the argument between him and Mr. Garza.
Well, I can only imagine Brute Bernard said, "Oh, look at the pretty boy muscle head."
Yeah, he might have said something like that.
Yeah.
And Garza took offense, and he punched him and knocked him out. Knocked out Brute Bernard.
Wow. Knocked out a professional wrestler. Wow.
So word got around to what happened, and it caught the ear of Bert Ruby, who was, you know, had the promotion here, Motor City Wrestling. And he, you know, contacted Dick Garza and said, would you like to become a wrestler? And just because in bodybuilding and stuff, you don't make a ton of money, you know, and especially to raise a family and own a home and, you know, support, you know, what you need to in life. So he took him up on the offer, and Bert Ruby trained, you know, Dick Garza. And he had his first match for him in Motor City Wrestling on April 28th, 1956.
56, wow.
And it was in a six-man tag team match. It was Dick Garza, Gentleman Jim Haiti, and the fabulous Louis Klein. And they took on Hans Herman, Danny Ferrazza, and of all people, in his first match, Brute Bernard.
No, no.
And that happened at the St. Francis Gym in Traverse City, Michigan.
I'll be darned. So Burt Ruby trained him. Burt Ruby also trained the Sheik, George Steele, the Animal. Wow, he had quite a list, didn't he?
And he had quite a promotion.
Yeah,
and, a lot of top talent.
He was pretty much it around Detroit for a long time.
Yeah, and it was only not even a year after, he made his debut, he won the Wolverine wrestling title on February 14th, 1957 in Toledo, Ohio, beating Dynamite Johnny Gates.
Oh, I remember Johnny Gates. He used to wrestle, and then he was a referee for a while, right?
Yes.
Well, the Wolverine wrestling title was just like a United States Championship or a Universal title. They just called it the Wolverine for the state of Michigan.
Right.
Gotcha.
And he made his Detroit debut as Dick Garza. This is all pre, Mighty Igor.
Yeah.
He made his Detroit debut versus Nobby McDonald.
Nobby?
Yeah, there's a name for you, that's lost in the history books. But that was on November 28th, 1959 at the Olympia Stadium.
Oh, at Olympia. Okay.
And over his time, first he started out as Dick Garza. And then we'll get into it how he also became Igor or Igor Vodic. And here's one that I really had to research, that he also wrestled under the name Johnny Bruce. And I had thought that first and foremost, it may have been with a tag team with his good friend Ivan Kalmakov, whose real name was Ed Bruce. Yeah. So I thought maybe they went as brothers, Ed and Johnny Bruce.
Right.
But that's not the case. He went down to Texas to wrestle, and he, got rid of the Dick Garza name and wrestled under Johnny Bruce. But the ironic thing is, he was a heel. He was a hated heel down there. And I guess there was a time that a fan, jumped into the ring with a machete or a shank or something. And Igor, saw this coming because, he's coming after him. And he stopped him. He knocked the shank out of the guy's hand. And I'm not sure if he punched him or, held him back or whatever. But in the end, the police arrested Igor, or, Johnny Bruce, at that time. And it had to take the promoter to go and bail him out, to get him out of jail, so that he could still wrestle. Any
idea why he went with Johnny Bruce and not Dick Garza?
I have no idea. Wow. That's a mystery that may never be solved in the annals of professional wrestling. Yeah. But I first, I talked about earlier a photograph, one of the earliest I ever took. And I was always playing around, when I was a kid with my mother's Brownie camera. And there was this one time in 1961 where Leaping Larry Shane, who was my upstairs neighbor, and he asked if I'd like to go to a birthday party because there was going to be other kids there, and and so he thought it be fun. So he took me, and we drove to Dearborn. From our east side of Detroit house, we went to Dearborn, and I walk in, and I have no idea who this guy was, but it was big, muscular, and I'm like, whoa, there's a wrestler. And basically it was. And it was Dick Garza at the time, or Mighty Igor.
Wow.
And I took a picture. The one picture that I still have is him holding up his birthday cake. And it says, "Dick is our pick." And you'll see the photograph now. Yeah. So, yeah, but
whatever.
From working on Motor City Wrestling, for Burt Ruby in 1962, he ventured out on the road, and he went to California, the Pacific Northwest, and he also wrestled around the Chicago area for Fred Kohler. But in October 4th, 1964 was the main change in life for him, to where he won a 10-man battle royal in the AWA. and it was his first time as Igor Vodik.
Oh, as you're talking now, he's in Minnesota.
Right, for Vern
wrestling
Gagne
for Vern
territory.
Gagne, who he probably knew when Vern was around here.
Yep.
Interesting. Yeah.
And, Vern Gagne nicknamed him Igor Vodik, and he won right after, I think it was like 2 weeks after he won the Battle Royal, he went against the AWA champion Mad Dog Vachon. And on May 15th, 1965, the Mighty Igor, or Igor Vodik at the time, won the title from Mad Dog Vachon.
It was sort of a short-term champion, though. He lost it back to the Mad Dog 1 week later. But this is fascinating to me. So Vern Gagne was the one who came up with the whole
idea.
Igor character?
Yep.
The kielbasa-eating,
Yeah.
long underwear wearing.
And,
Wow.
We'll talk about this in a little bit, on his Detroit debut, but they also did the same kind of gimmick, in the AWA, how Vern Gagne got him started. And I'll get, back to that in a second. But when he, first came to Detroit for big-time wrestling, and when he was in the AWA, the things he did, he would do feats of strength.
I sure remember
on
those.
TV.
Yeah.
He would, put his back up against a brick wall and put his feet straight out on the bumper of a car.
It was a Volkswagen that he did it on Channel 9. I can see that so clearly.
And, whoever was driving the car, usually, it was Ivan Kalmikov at the time, he'd put it in reverse, and boy, those tires would be spinning and smoking and everything. And here he is holding that car back.
Smiling. Yeah.
So they did the car thing. Also, they would have Ivan put a cinder block on the top of his head,
right?
With a towel, of course. Put the cinder block on the top of his head, and Ivan would take a sledgehammer and, really swing and break that over the top of his head. And we have a picture of that here also. Also, he would take iron bars, steel iron bars, like rebar and stuff, and just take them and bend them, in any shape he wanted.
Yeah.
He also took like chain link fence and, the chain links about this big. And just with his fingers, he would take them and pull them apart. And then you remember this too, because they did it in, a lot of cities around the big-time wrestling area. Remember the tug of wars?
The tug of war, yeah, right. Yeah, they get, I think 10 wrestlers. He's in the middle, ropes around both of his biceps, and the job the 10 guys have is to pull his arms apart.
Yep.
And so he does one of these, and all of a sudden, boom, pulls his arm together, and the guys go flying.
Well, I remember in Toledo, and I know one time in Detroit they did that, but they pulled 10 fans, 10 men,
did they?
10 men, out of the audience. So it was like a throw for them to get in the big-time wrestling ring and try to, do this tug of war on Igor's arms, but he always won.
And the feats of strength were before he'd ever wrestled. So as far as we know, there was no such person as Dick Garza.
Right.
I don't know how people didn't recognize him. Of course, he was clean-shaven as Dick Garza and had the long hair and the beard. Maybe that was it.
But when Vern Gagne came up with this idea for him, he had him grow a beard, and as you know, had him in they call it a wife beater, tee undershirt, his trunks and cut off long johns, with like work boots,
boots, tennis shoes later on,
and he had a floppy old hat and this old
sweater.
That overcoat, the smelly old overcoat in the wintertime. But Vern Gagne did the exact same thing that the Sheik did, and this is how Igor came about in Detroit territory. The Sheik had him sitting in the front row, right by Tobacco John. We always called him Tobacco John.
I don't know him.
Yeah, he was this Guy always wore a cowboy shirt, a little bolo.
Oh, that guy?
Yeah, a little
From
bolo.
Cobo,
And
sure.
this guy was very nice.
Yeah.
We had the same bus route, going back home at Cobo, and he was a nice enough man to,
Yeah.
get off the bus, walk me home, make sure I got home safely, and then he'd get back on the bus because he
cool.
lived at like 7 Mile in Van Dyke.
Yeah.
So he was a great guy. But he sat next to Tobacco John.
So we've got him out in the audience now before he's wrestled.
Right. So he came out there. He's got this big old overcoat on, and he's got a bag, and he's got the kielbasa, and he's eating. But at the time, all the wrestlers came out of the tunnel at Cobo, and they would always go to the left, to the ring steps on the left, and get into the ring.
Yeah.
Well, while Igor was sitting, they changed that. The baby faces would go that way, and they'd have the heels go to where Igor was sitting. And then that way, once the, heels got near Igor, they'd look at him and, he'd, puff up like this and, then he'd stand up and he'd, show his muscles and stuff and the heels would, and then it came to where they did this for a couple of weeks. And then at one time, the Sheik was coming, up the aisle. And, the Sheik, comes up by Igor, sees him, does, whatever mannerisms he did. Igor pulls off his coat, shows off his muscles, and that's the first time the fans, saw his physique. And, he would blurt out, Zambian Sheik, Zambian Sheik. And in Polish, that means kill Sheik.
Oh, okay.
So
he was just massive then.
Yeah.
Huge chest, really thin waist. Yeah.
And Ivan Kalmykov came out, talked to him, and then somehow magically brought him back to the dressing room, to the roar of the crowd. And, and then it was very soon after, I guess the very next week, he had his first match, in front of fans at Cobo. And that would have been on July 23rd, 1966, where he teamed with Ivan Kalmykov and they went against Boris and Nikolai Volkov.
The Volkov brothers, not Nikolai, the one in WWF with the Iron Sheik. This is the original Nikolai Volkov.
Right.
And Boris.
And Ivan and Igor came out on top. And Igor, he went over in the match. His finisher was the bear hug.
Sure.
He would get the guy in the big bear hug, and he'd be, flailing, and within seconds, the referee's calling for the bell.
Yeah.
And it was only 2 months after he made his debut in July, it would have been in September, that he had his first match with the Sheik.
Wow.
And the thing I remember about his first match with the Sheik, it was a bloody battle.
Yeah.
And the Sheik ended up tearing off his top, underwear, that he had. And after the bout was over, I went and grabbed it.
Oh,
so here's this bloody, T-shirt kind of thing, and I still have it in my collection.
In your
and I
fortress?
hope I can provide a picture for our fans here that I still have this.
I can remember when Igor went against the Sheik for the first time. I wasn't there, but watching all the hype and the buildup on TV, and it was tremendous. There was tremendous excitement and legitimate, not so much concern for Igor, but a thought that the Sheik had finally met his match.
Mm-hmm. And, when he came out, into the ring, he's like happy and waving to the fans, and he had his kielbasa, and then he'd get into the ring, and then he would be, waving and stuff, and then he'd be kissing the referee.
Kissing the ring announcers. He did that a lot. Yeah. Kissed his opponents.
Yeah. And what's this? When we were discussing this on the phone, you said something about Ben Gay that got me laughing.
Yeah. If you closed your eyes, you could always tell when Igor was around because there was this aura of Ben Gay around him. You smell Ben Gay. Oh, Igor's around somewhere. Yeah. I wonder what his home life might have been like,
Well, usually, most wrestlers used baby oil, to buff up their body and shine it. So when it hit the lights and the ring lights, they'd, shine. But Ben Gay, what's up with that?
Yeah, I think it was legitimately years of wear and tear on his muscles and probably had a lot of pain. Yeah.
On the Ben Gay thing, in recent years, when Johnny Cash passed away, oh no, it wasn't Ben Gay, it was a whole thing, but I'll tell the story anyway. When Johnny Cash passed away, it was one of these Lord Leighton butt cream things. I forgot the name of what that is.
Preparation H?
Preparation H. They approached Johnny Cash's wife to ask if they could borrow the song Ring of Fire for their commercial, and the family turned them down.
Where else, ladies and gentlemen, can you learn information like that but on Big Time Memories?
I'm sorry, I thought it was Ben Gay, but it was Preparation H.
Still a good story.
But that's a true story, though.
Stop.
But did Igor hold any titles? Because I was gone from promotion at that time.
Yeah.
And he stuck around.
Igor was pretty much the guy who was always chasing the Sheik, but he did, near the end of Big Time Wrestling, he did manage to beat the Sheik one time. I think it was one of those things where he won at one show and lost it back the next show.
But I think I have a photograph that a friend sent me that shows Igor, with the belt. So he did win that. But didn't he also have the tag team title with Hank James?
Hank James, or as Chuck Allen would say, Hurricane Hank James.
Well, what happened to Big Money?
Big Money.
Well,
too.
at the end of Kobo shows, in the late 70s, there was no Big Money.
The inspiration for Mo Money.
Yeah.
Malcolm Monroe. Yeah.
And then he also held titles in like the AWA.
Talked about beating Vachon for that. He held titles in Los Angeles. He was out there now and then. And in Puerto Rico, he was a big star in Puerto Rico, very highly regarded. He was one of these guys that when somebody like Abdullah the Butcher or Bruiser Brody or Tiger Jeet Singh, somebody would come in and terrorize the island to give them their comeuppance, the promoter would bring in the Mighty Igor.
And that was Carlos Colon.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And here's one funny story. It's not another Preparation H one, but I remember one time, because as a fan, you wait for the guys after the, show's out and they're done, showering and stuff, and you sit out and, you got your autograph book and you're waiting for autographs. Yeah. Well, there was this one time, there was me and a couple other friends that were waiting, for, guys to come out, and Igor and Ivan pop out. The dressing room. So we're there with our autograph books, so Igor is signing for us, and he's like, probably was a work, but he's, like a simpleton trying to sign an autograph. And all of a sudden, this old babcia, grandmother in Polish, comes up and, joins our little thing, and she starts talking Polish to Igor. And he's like a deer in the headlights, doesn't know what the hell she's talking about, because he doesn't speak Polish.
You've destroyed my boyhood myth. You mean Igor didn't speak Polish?
He was lucky to speak good English.
I never knew that.
Yeah, and then in 1975, he got another really good break, along with a lot of, like we said, the Hamilton, boys. But George Cannon was the booker for the IWA promotion, the Eddie Einhorn.
Eddie Einhorn, one of the owners of the Chicago White Sox.
Right.
Yeah.
And with, who's the guy in Cleveland and Buffalo? Pedro Martinez. Yeah. They started the IWA promotion.
Right. And Johnny Powers.
Yeah.
Right.
And used a lot of the big time wrestling stars, basically.
Yeah.
Igor,
Tex
McKenzie, Bulldog Brower, the Love Brothers,
the Mongols, Cannon.
Yeah. So it was almost like a sub big time wrestling promotion.
The Detroit Traveling Circus going national.
Yeah, and they were one of the first to try to go national.
Yeah.
And they even went into New York, into Roosevelt Stadium, and had a big, show in New Jersey to combat what was becoming, the WWF, trying to go national also.
Mil Mascaras was their champion.
Right.
But Igor was one of the big stars. Igor and Brower was this huge feud they had.
Yeah, and unlike, our UWA promotion, our rival promotion, the IWA promotion didn't last that long either.
No.
Times were changing, the economy was changing and things. And, but for Igor, he got very lucky. He was lured away from the IWA promotion by Jim Crockett in the Mid-Atlantic, promotion. And there he feuded with the Masked Superstar.
Bill Eadie.
Right.
One time, one of the Mongols here in this area.
Right.
In fact, he was with us in Universal.
Yes, he was.
Guido, and he was Bolo.
Bolo.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that was Bill Eadie, the Masked Superstar. Wonderful, wonderful wrestler. Yeah.
And do you remember, because their feud was big, for, the Mid-Atlantic at that time. Do you remember the incident that happened? An unfortunate, over the years for Igor, but the big feud that they had, and then in one match, the Masked Superstar had a manager, Boris Malenko, was it?
Professor, yeah.
Professor Boris Malenko. And while the Masked Superstar took the referee's attention away, Malenko got up on the ring apron, had Igor, and he had a lit cigar that he always smoked. Mm-hmm. And he jabbed it, into his, it was like a gimmick kind of thing. It was supposed to hit him in the eyebrow to, go like this and put it out, but it slipped and it went into his eye. Mm. So over, time and years later, his vision was a little bit blurred, from that incident. But it was a big gimmick that really, because Igor left, because of the injury, but then made a big comeback and, made a ton of money doing that, feud with Bill Eadie.
Yeah, that was the Crockett territory was the prestige booking area of that time.
Right.
That was the place to be, to make the money, because they had all these huge population centers in Virginia and the Carolinas.
And a lot of the guys were on the Superstation TBS, which was one of the first wrestling promotions that were on cable TV, if you were fortunate enough to have cable at that time.
Yeah.
But, Igor, from, the start when he, first came to big time wrestling, just because he was a home guy, didn't like to travel that much in his later years, he stuck with, big time wrestling right up until the end. And he wrestled on the very final show at Cobo Arena for big time wrestling on October 12th, 1980, where he went against Don Kent.
Interesting.
And what about that was Don Kent and Igor? That's a main event in any territory. And, over time, things were drying up here, but he still had drawing power, so I know at one point, remember when he went down to Florida? And
right.
In 1981.
Ran into this huge bleach blonde bass guitarist who went on to pretty big things later.
Yeah, Bulk Mogan,
Terry Bollea,
Hulk Hogan.
Hulk Hogan.
So they brought Igor down to Florida to feud with him because at that time Hogan was a heel, and Igor being the big muscle guy, two muscle guys going at it.
Yeah.
And Igor came out on top. He was put over, so he's got the distinction of going over on Hulk Hogan at one point.
What about Putski? We should talk about Putski. Ivan Putski.
Why? He was a joke. He was a imitator, just a ripoff artist.
Well, we don't know that he necessarily came up with it. It was probably a promoter who came up with the idea, but Putski was just an awful ripoff, total ripoff of the Mighty Igor, from the costume, the clothing, to the kibasa, to the kissing the ladies at ringside, everything.
Right down to the outfit.
And he did it in Texas, then went to New York for a while and gradually evolved into the bodybuilder Ivan Putski.
It just hit me. I know his real name.
Yeah.
Joseph Bednarski.
Right.
So at least he was Polish.
Yeah.
But he wasn't Igor Polish.
No.
Imitator, he got over, You know, I mean, he had a hell of a physique,
Yeah.
you know, no doubt about that. But, you know, it's the same thing like how many different rips off of the Sheik were there around the
No,
country.
that's
You know,
true.
it's like, you know, where there's money to be made, just, you know,
Yep.
but in wrestling, imitation isn't the best form of
Not
flattery.
necessarily, no.
Yeah. But in his, you know, after he did that run, he did go back to British Columbia. He worked up in Montreal for the Rougeaus, and then he went back to the AWA for Vern Gagne in their dying days. But the one thing he did, he was always homesick. He always came back home. And we were fortunate enough on the promotions that Ricky Cortez had his promotion, Al Costello had his promotion here, and Malcolm Monroe had a promotion. But all three promotions worked together. You know, a lot of the same guys worked on the same shows. And Igor was one of those. He worked mainly for, Ricky Cortez's promotion because they lived near each other in Dearborn and they were good friends for many, many years.
Yeah.
But the only problem I saw being in the dressing room, you had guys like Iron Mike Anthony and, Malcolm Monroe to a sense, Ricky Cortez, were working the main events, and I was managing, a couple of those guys in the main events. And the problem was Igor was like on the second match. He was always in the preliminary matches. He wasn't main eventing, any of those shows.
Yeah.
Which, sitting in the dressing room and talking, you sense that, he was very quiet, on his own. He had his son Eric with him many times, a great kid.
Yeah. Well, he was always that way. He was always very quiet.
Yep.
And, he sort of played the dumb gimmick all the way out. He really did, which was smart because it kept a lot of people away from him.
Mm-hmm.
He let Kelmikoff do all the negotiating and things like that.
Yeah, but, I saw him as, being maybe a little bit bitter and not really liking, not being a top guy, which he should have been, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
He earned that respect to be a main eventer, and he should have. And, that's, one thing that I regret, on many of the shows that I worked at that time that he was on.
Well, to me, he was always a main eventer no matter where he appeared on a card.
Yeah. And I remember he went back to Puerto Rico in 1987 for a short time, like you said, going against Bruiser Brody before his untimely death. But he had his last match April 21st, 1988, versus Ox Morgan in Northridge, Ohio. Yeah, I'm not memorable by any means, but that was his final match.
Well, I hope he won.
I would hope so against Ox Morgan.
Yeah.
And the only thing that perplexes me, at times, because we're both, have been friends and we're fans of, Igor, is that he is in no wrestling Hall of Fames.
Yeah.
How is that possible? The only one he is in is Midwest Championship Wrestling run by Jim Lancaster. A nice honor, but he not in any of the big ones. The Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, that imaginary, WWE, one that, that's
he never worked for them. Neither did Abdullah the Butcher, and Abdullah the Butcher's in their Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
But Igor wasn't known as, scientific, skilled wrestler, so that would knock him out of contention with some of them. But certainly for his career, its longevity, the main event nature of his career, he certainly deserves that kind of recognition.
He was a draw.
Oh,
he made promoters money.
Yeah.
And then in his later life, didn't he purchase a farm?
Some people say, that he purchased a farm on Lake Huron. That's a question I really don't know the answer to, is how well off was he, if at all, if he had a lot of money. Some people allege he did have a lot of money in those years with the Crockett promotion, with the IWA. He invested in various things like real estate, and that he eventually bought a farm on Lake Huron.
I have an idea.
Yeah?
Why don't we contact his son, who I know lives in our area here?
He watches this show.
He does.
Hi, Eric.
Hi, Eric. Why don't we try to get Igor's son, Eric, and have him on a special edition of Bigtime Memories, and have him answer some of these questions about, the farm on, Lake Huron. Tell us about his young, years with his dad. What was it like?
Yeah.
Let's get Eric on this show. Would, you wrestling fans like to see that? Drop us a line. Drop us a note. Drop us a message.
I see him out there saying yes.
I hope so.
I think we ought to do it.
He's a good guy.
Yeah.
And in final, it was always great talking about Iggy and, which we nickname him, all the time.
He passed away
January 7th, 2002. He had a heart attack when he was taken to the hospital. And, it's always sad, when we come to the end of our episodes here, Terry, but we always try to bring back that memory, what it's like when the fans were at Cobo or any arena in the territory, when you would give a ring announcement, and if you would give one final one for the Mighty Igor.
With pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, from Poland, weighing 265 pounds, the Mighty Igor.
I'm really proud to say that I'm a part of IBW.
I take pride in IBW that we are a family-run company.
It's a fight. It's a sport. At IBW, tradition has always mattered.
You're going to see world-class professional big-time wrestling at its best.
This ain't no sports entertainment. This is professional wrestling.
International big-time wrestling's The Fix. Each and every week, your fix of IBW action. You want entertainment? Look no further than Rocks TV.
International Big-Time Wrestling!
Wrestling fans, if you like what you've seen, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and also don't forget to ring that bell.